my most recent obsession is the Channel 5 documentary series When Kids Kill. I am a true crime addict. I write crime fiction. One of my favourite, focuses is when children commit crimes, because I think the psychology of it is very interesting. And this series looks at, as it suggests, kids who kill. I think the youngest one in this was 13. The youngest in this was 13. I think the oldest would have been 16 or 17. Because obviously once you're 18, you're an adult. And there are 2 seasons, series. I believe there's a third one, but it's not currently available on my 5, unfortunately. But each series has about 5 or 6 episodes, and each one looks at 1 or 2 really shocking cases of when a child, usually a teenager, has committed murder. And some of them I'd heard of. The very first case, the first episode, I hadn't heard of. Leah Green presents the first 6 episodes. Roach Bridgeman presents the second lot of episodes, and I think the second lot were the ones that I preferred. I feel like they were a lot more hard-hitting. I feel like obviously the programme had got into its stride by this point, and it's very well edited and very well put together. We find out a lot about the case for what's available. Obviously with cases where children have committed murder, most of the time they're given anonymity by default. But with a lot of these cases, we actually do know their names. We do know who they were. Although I will say there's one case that I think was in the second series where the story was told, but the identity of the 2 killers were not revealed. But I was familiar with this case, and they have obviously since then been revealed. So a little bit out of date in that respect, but everything's really well edited and really well presented. Each episode has a theme. For example, gang culture or familial crime, random attacks. There's one, I won't go into too much about any of the episodes because I don't want to spoil it, but there's one where this teenager was obsessed with Dexter. It's quite a familiar case. It's one I'd heard of, but I hadn't seen an episode about it yet. He was obsessed with Dexter, and, well, let's just say the results weren't great. There was another one where somebody was murdered just for the fun of it, I guess, is what the point was. And we actually surprisingly got to see footage of the police interviews in that case. There are some cases, mainly with the older children, so the kind of the teenagers, almost 18-year-olds, we do get to see police footage and things like that, where the content is available. I think it's utilised everything at its disposal. There are interviews with victims' family members. The very first episode has an interview with an eyewitness whose account is shocking. The fact that they actually witnessed basically moments before this murder. And to be fair, the very first episode, it's the one about the girls it's kind of like a halfway house, like supervised living. I'm not really sure what term they used, but basically it's for young people who need to get a property of their own, a flat, a place to live, a room, whatever. And the way that this girl died, bearing in mind she was 19, unless she had any psychological issues, I feel like her reaction was not sensible. And I actually don't believe that it was 100% down to the bullying of those 2 girls. I'm already giving away too much about what happened. I don't want to spoil it, but I just feel like there's something else there. I feel like she couldn't have been 100% of her own mind. There was no suggestion that she'd been drinking or doing drugs or anything. At least not in the episode. But I just feel like there's something else there that's not quite right. Because no amount of bullying, when you're in a house with other people who could help you, and to whom you could go to get help, it just seems like an overkill. It's an awful turn of phrase to pick, but it seemed like a reaction that wasn't really necessary. There's also the question that maybe she just slipped. Maybe she didn't mean to do what she did, and maybe it wasn't technically murder, or I guess manslaughter. So that case, which I hadn't heard of, I thought was pretty interesting, but not as clear-cut as it seemed. The case, one to look out for is the case where 2 girls abused, badly beat up this frail alcoholic. They took advantage of her kindness, really. And then they made I don't know if it was a 999 call or just a local police station call, but you get the call recording of them asking for the police to hurry up and pick them up so they could go home. And it's just, I wanted to slap them in the face. And I think, was that the defense attorney or somebody else was saying that while they didn't have a positive role model in life, it's not really their fault, we can't really punish them. And I'm thinking, well, they're fully grown adults with no disclosed learning difficulties. So I think that that's disgusting. There are some opinions in this that are quite unagreeable. Emma Kenny voices a lot of thoughts. I really like her. She's probably my favourite TV psychologist. So there's a lot of really interesting things here. Obviously, it's not gruesome. I'm trying to think of the most disturbing thing. I think the most disturbing thing that we saw was blood on a television set, to the best of my recollection, because we're obviously dealing with children. And honestly, it's fabulous. None of these are young children, of course, but they're still innocent in their age. And it does, as I said, look at some of the psychology behind it. They go to workshops with young people to show how communities are trying to, dispel this idea that you need to be tough and need to be in a gang. Community groups that are looking at how to spot if you're being mentally or emotionally abused by your partner. Really fantastic mix of information here. I truly love it. I hope I can get my hands on those series 3 episodes, but it doesn't seem to be a complete series. So if anybody knows what the outcome of those were, please do let me know. But I definitely hope we get more of this. When Kids Kill is brilliant.